Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the TV movie special Werewolf by Night on Disney Plus. And I really enjoyed this one. This was probably the best one out of the Disney Plus yet in what it did, because it understood what it was trying to be, and it didn't get overly bogged down in anything. It is a send up and an exploration of the monster movies and the monster universe stuff that is in the MCU and that we're getting introduced to here. And it just works. It's a Halloween special that actually gives us an interesting kind of story, gets us through that in about 53 minutes. I wasn't really bored or anything throughout this. Now granted, it's a very kind of simplistic kind of thing, but it fits within there, and there's definitely more kind of answers that we can get at certain points because of the questions that are introduced. But it's cool to see this kind of brought up like this, and I think that if Marvel employed more of this kind of strategy, this is more of a mini film. It's a film, all right. It's like a TV movie kind of film kind of thing that is exploring and kind of expanding certain things. Certain ones are... I have had a kind of weird feeling with most of the Marvel TV shows that we've been having on Disney Plus, because there is a difference between what you get in a TV show and people understanding what kind of goes throughout a TV show versus an elongated and chopped up movie. And that leads to weird kind of pacing problems and shit that kind of happens, and you're like, I don't know, man. This was a really good example of them just understanding what their objective was, doing an entertaining story, and then kind of going through and actually expanding stuff within the MCU. So we pretty much start this thing with them kind of giving us the lowdown of the Bloodstone family, about monsters and creatures, and of course you have that kind of thing of who are the real kind of monsters and what kind of goes on with that, and that's definitely played with in here. That's also typical of those kind of Wolfman, Dracula, Frankenstein kind of movies as well, because it's be careful hunting monsters lest you become one kind of thing, because we see that there's hunters and everything like that. There's the Bloodstone family that has this thing, the Bloodstone, that can hurt and help them kill monsters. And the thing is, the latest one, Ulysses Bloodstone, has died. And typical around those kind of turn of the centuries kind of murder mystery kind of things, you usually have this gathering of somebody fucking died and they have all this kind of cool shit, and these other people are I kind of want that cool shit, and they get invited and they come in and we see kind of what goes on. So we've got this group of hunters that are invited in. Our main kind of one that there's two of them, but the main one that we are centered on with first is Jack. And he comes in, we see all these kind of monster things around. Now granted, I didn't look and deep dive all the different ones. There's definitely vampires there, other kind of creatures, Wendigos, all that kind of shit. And you're alright, they're definitely expanding this stuff out. We see other kind of hunters in the mix with all their different kind of eclectic kind of looks. And the thing is, most of this is done in black and white. And I say most of it because at the end we kind of get a shift thing back into color, which I think was a very nice touch. But you see them all kind of side-eyeing each other and all that, trying to see what's going on. Let's see here. But they're all there because they're thinking who's going to get the Bloodstone. And Verussa, she is the widow of Ulysses Bloodstone in this, kind of gathering everybody into the effect and seeing what's kind of going on. But we see this one Joshua dude pretty much bragging about his confirmed kills. He's entering his 30th season. We get that Jack has these markings on his face, and that he's evidently has them for his ancestors, giving us a little bit of character development. Now granted, the only ones that get most of the character development are Jack, and then Elsa, who comes in last, who wasn't invited, and pretty much is like a black sheep of the family. She didn't continue under the tutelage of Ulysses. Verussa is just like very dismissive of her and everything. Like, fine, you can come in, you you bitch, pretty much. And she's like, you didn't continue under your father's training. It's like, I might have gotten other kind of training. As we sit down and we see that she kind of does the whole kind of chair pull kind of thing as everybody's pretty much seated down. But Ulysses Bloodstone, following in the grand kind of weird, eccentric kind of person's tradition, has made himself into this kind of like mechanical corpse thing. You know, there's like mechanical fortune teller kind of things where he's that and saying, all right, cool, here's the whole kind of lowdown. You all want the bloodstone? All right, we're gonna do this so somebody can get it. We're gonna have a monster. We're gonna strap this fucking thing to it. You're gonna go into a maze. Whoever one of you gets it wins. And see, this works out in their advantage because the monster is then not at full power, but yet it is still angered because it's strapped a thing that could fuck with it on its back. And it's like, huh, okay. And then we go through and we get up on a list, and evidently Jack has like the most confirmed kills of monsters. And he's like, kind of wasn't me, but we'll see. And of course, you're getting the whole kind of feeling that something's kind of up with him. So they get out. It's the weirdest kind of thing. If you've seen, if you've played like Bloodborne or like seen anything with Bloodborne, you get a lot of vibes out of that from that actually here as they're hunting and going out for a hunt. And Jack gets the kind of thing to go in the maze first, and he's kind of going around and everything. And then, of course, other people go in. They do not start out with weapons, but whatever they find in there, they can utilize for their own kind of benefits. And the thing is, he starts going around, but then him and Elsa find each other. He's like, hey, how about this? And the thing is, you fight each other to also get for this thing as well. And he's like, listen, how about we just pass each other by before the Joshua dude starts like going at, and we start getting our little action sequences as he then starts trying to go after Elsa. But she's able to kind of like get away from him and take his fucking axe. Then, of course, they're kind of all separated, and she kind of gets near this mausoleum kind of place and fights this one dude, chopping his arm off and taking his kind of like dart thing as the one Joshua dude pops back up and kind of gets his axe back and then moves on. Also at this point, Jack runs into the monster. And here's the thing. You're like, okay, what kind of monster? Because we've seen they do the effective kind of like horror movie stuff where we see kind of weird things going on where there's bits and pieces of the maze where are burned away and everything. I was like, what the fuck kind of creature is this? And we learn that it is Man-Thing. It is, okay, for lack of a better term, almost kind of similar to Swamp Thing, except I actually like looked up more this dude's Ted. He was involved in making, of course, another kind of super soldier serum like Captain America's. However, he was like running away and kind of like got injected with it and got thrown into this kind of swamp thing where magical, mystical things kind of came in, and he's kind of like a nexus being that is connected with like Florida. And it's like, oh, cool. And these guys know each other. They're like, okay, cool. We'll figure this stuff out. I'm going to try and like find a crack, blast it open so you can get out, all right? And it's really kind of cool because there's still the CGI with Man-Thing is very impressive, even in black and white and in color. It's like, what the fuck? Did you give these people actually enough time to do shit with this? And it's like She-Hulk's kind of stuff, which gets kind of weird. Now, granted, it's not the worst CGI I've seen, but you're overworking and not giving people enough time to do shit. Like, take your time and do what you can. Understand your budgets and your time constraints and work within them. Do not try and pump out a chopped up movie with movie effects in less time than it would take for the movie. But you see them, and you can see the expressiveness with Man-Thing, Ted. It's like, alright, cool, we'll do this. I'll get you out of here. Alright, cool. I'll find the place, I'll get your attention, we'll blast it out, and we'll get out of here. Alright? It's like, alright, cool. And then, of course, he kind of like then links up with Elsa, but they see that one of the other hunters is coming at them, and they accidentally get locked in the mausoleum. She had gotten injured by getting cut, and he kind of helps her bind the wound correctly. And not that she doesn't know how, but they're in a kind of crazy ass situation, and she's just trying to figure out what she needs to do to get the bloodstone. and he's like, all right, listen, he's kind of like family, just help me get him out of here. And she just wants the bloodstone. So, all right, cool. We'll blast that open. We'll get out of here. And she sees one of her kooky aunts that her father had talked about. It's like, yeah, she always was worried about like coming back from the dead, which of course we've seen a lot of shit like that happening in the MCU. And she would always have a backup plan. So she like bashes her way in, gets like this kind of cool ass like weapon thing, and also gets the key. They open it up. They kind of divide. He goes to find a place because he's got the bomb thing because he accidentally activated it. And then we kind of get a little thing where he's... The only kind of joke that doesn't land for me, and this is mainly because it like goes on for too long, is him trying to attach the explosive to the wall to blow it out. So they kind of get there. He's doing this. It's just on there for too long. It's like, okay, cool. He's like, keeps trying to toss it and everything. Eventually gets it there. Elsa runs into Man-Thing, calls him Ted, because he told him to tell her that, and then she walks him there, he gets there, it's blasted out, the bloodstone falls off, Ted's pretty much gotten out of there, but then as Jack tries to touch the bloodstone, it blasts him away, revealing he's a monster, but we don't know what yet. And of course the hunters are like, you bastard, we got one of you. And of course, if you're watching this at this point, you're like, okay, I understand trying to protect people, but these hunters are pretty much monsters, just hurting and doing stuff, because Man-Thing isn't a horrible killing machine. Granted, he has like grabbed people and they've turned into flames, but that's because of part of his touch and like what he can do. Because that's how the Joshua dude got like. So of course they then wake up and we see that Fuck, why do I keep going to him? Ted is Man-Thing. Jack is right here with Elsa. Jack and Elsa are like, okay, this isn't good. And he's, of course, alluding that he is a werewolf because he locks himself up and he's got his whole system and everything. And it's like, yeah, the next full moon's not like for 5 days. We can get out of here. No problem. And then Elsa's like, yeah, the bloodstone can turn you into your werewolf form in like 5 seconds. Granted, we do get to a point where it is utilized to turn him into a werewolf, but it takes it takes longer than 5 seconds because there's like a whole incantation and everything involved. So Verussa is just like pretty much just gloating and everything and being like, all right, let's do this shit, and turn Jack into his werewolf form. And it's a cool werewolf form. Like, granted, I think it's cool because it goes more upon the monster movie kind of werewolf forms. Now, granted, I do like certain, like, I'm okay with certain kind of different kind of takes on werewolf forms. I do like the underworld werewolf forms because it's kind of cool and the effects that they were able to do where it's more wolf than man. This is more man-wolf, where it's like you're definitely more of a man and you've got your claws, you got your fangs and everything, and it definitely looks like the old school wolf man kind of thing. And I'm like, I appreciate that. And it looks cool. And then he's like, "Rrr," and it's like, holy shit. You better make that out of silver. But it didn't, because Verussa's got, and before this was kind of going on, Jack pretty much like gets up on her to on Elsa to like get her scent and everything like that on him, so he doesn't forget her. And she's like, "Has this worked?" And he's like, "Once." So you know that Jack is taking this seriously. So he's pretty much trying to go after Verussa's arm, and they get her out, and then we get the action scene where the Wolfman goes nuts. The werewolf goes nuts, and it's like, this is cool. Like, if you're going for an action set piece with your pacing and everything like this works out very well. And this is like an actual kind of like bloody throwdown of shit, because he's like ripping people up. He's like taking arms and shit. Like, not a lot of them, mind you. It's not gore for the sake of gore, but enough to realize and showcase, action-wise, that Jack as a werewolf is a potent thing that you have to fucking deal with, and not that he's just gonna be like confetti gore everywhere, you know what I mean? There's a difference between tactful use of how violence and everything is done versus just sensory overload shock value, if you know what I mean. There are two different kind of ways to do that. This is more showcasing characters through action and everything. And you see the hunters trying to deal with them, and they're not having a good time. Jack kills a couple, but Elsa's able to get out because he busted his way through the cage, and Elsa takes out a couple of them. Pretty awesomely, I might add. She has some nice action moves and set pieces. Granted, I can understand how people can go that they kind of go a little bit too hard on copying a lot of Scarlett Johansson's kind of Black Widow kind of things with like the leg throwovers and stuff like that. But sometimes that's kind of how you like deal with certain kind of things, and it's still done in a kind of different way that I do feel that there's at least enough of Elsa's character shown throughout of what's kind of going on, because she like uses minimalistic kind of moves. I mean, granted, Black Widow could too, but like this gave me more of a feeling of John Wick from her, if that makes sense, where she doesn't utilize extraneous movements. She doesn't go flashy. She goes, this is my objective, like slashing this one dude's throat like this, burying a sword in this one chick's head as Jack is like ripping through all these other ones. Varus is pretty much using the Bloodstone to try and kill him, but Elsa's able to take her down, not out, but down, and then she goes towards Jack, and he's like on her, and you think that he's almost going to take her out, but he remembers her and then runs off. Very reminiscent of the other Wolfman, as Bruce is like pissed off at her, and then Ted pops up and grabs her, and she bursts into flames and stuff like that, and Elsa's like, okay, he went that way. And she then picks up the Bloodstone and pretty much tells the butler dude to kind of clean up the mess and get this shit cleaned up as she sits down. And the thing is, most of the time, the only color we see is the red from the Bloodstone, and then it starts to bleed out as this ends, and we see everything turn into color. We see that Jack wakes up in his man form and pretty much talks to Ted, and he's like, alright, I remembered her, we're good, and everything, as Man-Thing's been like making him coffee and stuff like that, and they're just figuring out what to do and get food-wise, and Man-Thing wants sushi. And it's like, okay, cool. And then it ends that way. I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. We get big kind of supernatural characters of Man-Thing. We've got Jack as the Wolfman, Werewolf. We've got Elsa Bloodstone, who's a prolific hunter. Granted, this is a good way to kind of seed this and everything. We got the vampires and everything. Glad that they didn't go overboard and try and put Blade in this. Though granted, if they had used this with a little bit of tease of Blade or whatnot, of being like, oh yeah, one of our most prolific hunters couldn't be here. And also because he's half vampire, he probably wouldn't have been interested in the Bloodstone anyway. I mean, because it would potentially react poorly to the vampire half of him. But I'm glad that they held back. They had this story in mind, and it was contained, and it just worked very well. I liked seeing how Jack had his system in place, how he wanted to help and not hurt people as much, and Elsa pretty much really wasn't going bloodthirsty either. It showcased these two characters and their differences with the hunters very well, as the other ones came off as like psychotic assholes that were just going to do shit because like, hey, fighting monsters, that gives us a penchant to just kill whatever the fuck we want. And it's like, that kind of makes you a monster too, dude. As they're pretty much going after this Bloodstone that could be used to, like, more effectively do that. It's like, alright, the thing is, yes, Jack is a werewolf, but he really wasn't going to hurt anybody until you pretty much tried to force him in an uncontrollable bestial state and fuck with him. And even then, he didn't go completely, utterly sadistic and just trying to hurt people. And Elsa did as well. She didn't go nutso, just she was taking out things that were threats and trying to like make sure that Jack could be okay because he didn't want to be in this position. I mean, granted, you'd be like, oh, he came here to like deal with the Bloodstone and everything like that, but probably not. He came here to get Man-Thing out because he learned that he got captured. He's like, I gotta get my family out of this shit. So yeah, I liked the introduction of these characters. I liked the utilization of the monster portion of the Marvel Comics universe and being like, hey, here's a TV movie special. And it just works, and it was fun, and I wasn't bored, and I'm like, oh, this is a cool throwback and everything, and it pays such well homage to certain things of like the kind of crazy things being brought together, how the monsters and everything are kind of utilized, and the people fighting the monsters and the people actually being the monsters. It just did all that shit well, and I'm like, damn. Not even in the point of like it being copied and pasted from things, but proper homages to things. It's like, yes, like when Jack was transforming, we don't see it like we've seen it in normal, like usual kind of like later werewolf films, like American Werewolf in Paris or London, or Underworld or whatnot. We see it in silhouette, and Elsa is like reacting to it. That's an effective kind of way to do it. And I was just like, wow, this, more of this, please. I know it's kind of weird, and it's not that I'm completely down on the MCU. I'm still a fan of the MCU. I'm still a fan of Marvel. It's just there's certain things that they've been doing lately, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And then when they do something like this that is kind of different but really works for me, I'm like, cool. This is the shit like that this should be trying to do. So if you're into kind of like Halloween, October, spooky kind of stuff, monster movies, I would definitely recommend this. It just hits that shit well, and it's 53 minutes. It doesn't overstay its welcome and everything. I would definitely recommend it. Now, granted, if you're not into violence, this is the more violent kind of end of that, so no, if you're like, I don't want to see that. Now, granted, you don't really, since it's in black and white, it's not as visceral as if like seeing it in full color with like blood and everything like that. But you'd still be like, oh god, that's kind of fucked up. So if you're into that stuff, cool, it works out. It's that kind of middle ground, you know what I mean? That PG-13 kind of thing. It's not complete R-rated of like we're like really getting into the suffering of these other kind of things. It's more like, all right, cool. These people are suffering, but we're not getting enjoyment out of it. If that makes sense. It's not torture porn. It's that kind of middle of the road. But if you're like, I don't want to have werewolf nightmares, that's okay. Don't go for this then. Yeah. So those are my opinions on the movie. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.